Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to Be Your Own Hero. I'm a stage 4 prostate, bone, and lung cancer survivor, patient/survivor. I'm not, I consider myself to be a patient for life because once you get cancer, I feel, this is my personal opinion, that you need to always be proactive about it and keep doing the things that got you to health. Things are going great out here in Texas. So we moved to Texas back in October, and we're very, very busy with our new granddaughter, who is now just about 5 months old. And we're really, really enjoying it and enjoying people. And I also love just meeting brand new people like the guest I have here today, who is uh, it was a chance meeting, and we'll talk a little bit about that, how we met. But at this time, what I'd like to do is bring on an incredible guest, Mr. Dan Hubbard. Dan, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. My name is Dan Hubbard. I'm the executive director for foramanda.org. That's the numeral 4, amanda.org. We are a 501 that provides emergency financial services to cancer patients and their families. Um, my wife and I were moved deeply by a term called financial toxicity in cancer care. And we were extraordinarily fortunate to have great insurance, great employment, and a family structure. But an awful lot of cancer patients don't have that support. So Amanda, while she was still alive, said, "Hey, I want you to establish a foundation, and I want you, when I'm not here, to help cancer patients with their financial needs." Um, that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. Um, I'm still learning. I knew nothing about philanthropy before the foundation, so I'm still learning, and I've been fortunate to have quite a few people help me to be better, so that I can serve the foundation better. And I'm very happy to be here. I've looked at some of your podcasts and your personal story, and I've been moved, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate that. Let's talk about the star of the show, Amanda. How did she, what happened when she got diagnosed with cancer, and how did that come about? Uh, can you give us a little background on that?
Sure. So it was at the beginning of the pandemic, and she hadn't been feeling well for a few weeks. And one day, and you have to remember at that time it was very difficult to just set up an appointment with your primary care physician.
Yes, I
Um,
know.
and you
I,
don't
I
want to,
went I went through the same thing right at the same time, actually.
yeah.
Uh,
And,
you know,
and if you recall, even the emergency room was like, please don't come unless it's an emergency. Well, one day she woke up and she felt horrible, and her skin was yellow. She was jaundiced, and so were her eyes, and she had abdominal pain, and she had a little bit of fever. And I was like, baby, we have to go to the hospital. So we went. She had to actually go into the emergency room herself, and I waited outside. And she called me and said they're admitting me. And so when she was admitted, I was able to come inside. Um, and they did a lot of imaging. They actually did some biopsy, a lot of blood, and you know, several days later, um, they said, "Look, you have colon cancer that's metastasized to your liver. We're staging this at 4, and you have to get a port installed very quickly and start chemotherapy." But the soonest they could schedule her to get a port installed, I think, was either 2 or 3 days. So they said, "We're going to discharge you. These are some medicines that we're actually going to fill the prescriptions for here. And here's your appointment. But the physician that explained this to us said, you're likely to die from this. And, I think Amanda and I were like, I think every cancer patient, like, no, we're not giving up. We're not resigning to this. Sorry. So, Amanda, the second he left, Amanda contacted Duke and said, hey, we want to be seen as soon as possible. This is my diagnosis. What do you need from me to get my records? And she went through that whole process. Several days later, we arrived at Duke, but we arrived a little late. The morning she was to have her port installed, she had a lot of abdominal pain, and they did some imaging and they found that she had a blockage. So she had to go into emergency surgery. They removed about a foot of tumorous bowel, and she had an ileostomy, which she didn't know about. I don't remember them telling me. So this was a huge shock, and that's a pretty major surgery. So she went into ICU, and about a day into it, she was lucid, and they explained, look, you've just had this major surgery, you can't start chemotherapy. And they were gonna draw that out to several months, and I begged. Her mother and father begged, we'll sign anything that you need, but we want to start chemo immediately, if not sooner. And I think what we agreed on was 45 days. That's what they felt medically comfortable with, backing down from what their preference was to allow her body to heal. So they sent us home. Home at the time was Charlotte, North Carolina, but we moved to Salem, Virginia, to be closer to her family. So we were there for several weeks, and finally we went back to Duke. And
Non-caller.
forgive me, I am so sorry.
No problem.
My
So
phone
let me pause you right there. So she's having all these things go on. What's going through your mind in this process? Where are you at?
So I remember at the time, I was, first of all, I didn't know a lot about cancer.
Most people don't.
Yeah,
I didn't either.
and there's so much to know. I could not, for the life of me, see a world or my world without Amanda. And so in my mind's eye, we were going to do anything and everything that we could do to beat the disease. There wasn't any thought in my mind of letting her go. There wasn't any thought in mind of her not being present in this world. And what I came to realize is that was a mistake. Because excuse me, I'm so sorry. Every physician that we talked to while she was in the hospital, following that emergency surgery for that, it was almost a month, said repeatedly, in as many ways as they could convey it, that she was going to die from this disease, and that it had progressed too much. And I refused to see it. I refused to accept it. And it wasn't until the last 30 days of her life, when she had stopped conventional chemotherapy, but they had put her on something called Lonsurf, which is, an at-home chemotherapy that you take orally by pill. And it made her so sick, and she hated it so much. And
So let me pause you right there.
Yeah, sure.
So if you feel like that mindset was a mistake, if you had a do-over, what would you do differently?
I don't know that I could do it differently. Um, even knowing what I know, but you know, she wanted to go on another Disney cruise. Um, she wanted to she wanted to see where I grew up in Germany. Um, she wanted to go to the Caribbean, go to the Caribbean. There were a lot of things she wanted to do. Um, and if you like, you can call that a bucket list. But we didn't do those things, and we could have, but we did. Um, and we didn't do it because I insisted that she'd go through chemotherapy to save her life. And I think there were very subtle ways that she was trying to convey to me at times that um, she would rather spend her last days living life, right, instead of trying to cling to it. And you know, I can see it somewhat clearly now. I've written about it in a couple of different places. At the time, I couldn't see it. I could not.
We lost our audio here. I'm not getting anything from you. Can you hear me? There we go.
Oh, well, I don't know what happened.
I don't either. Let's keep going.
But yeah, I mean, it's you know, when people ask me now, I say to them, consider how the patient wants to live their life if they don't go into remission. But you know, I feel horrible when I say that, and I've written it, and I feel hypocritical, I guess is a word, because I didn't do that. And you know, I feel like the most difficult challenge in that time frame was trying to get a consensus because you know she had a mother, she had a father, she had a sister, she had nieces that she loved so dearly because she helped raise them. And I think that maybe, and I think especially her father, I think her father had a sense that I was being naive, but he never said anything. Um, and I think something that very, very sad is, you know, she passed away on January 30th, 2022. He was diagnosed with cancer just a few months later.
Oh, wow.
And we went to Duke and I drove him for the infusions. And I think on the third trip, you know, it really hit him very, very hard because he was having the symptoms of the disease and, of course, the side effects of chemotherapy. And, you know, he broke down on one trip to Durham and he just looked at me and was like, you know, is this what Amanda went through? And I said, yeah. And I think that made him very emotional because it made him personally realize the pain that his daughter went through. And, you know, when he expressed that emotion to me, you know, you know, I broke down. And, you know, we're talking about a man, her father, that I don't think has ever cried. But so you have him and me, you know, driving me to Durham, bawling our eyes out. um, and you know, that was a bit of a bonding experience. But he passed away as well.
Oh, so sorry.
Yeah, and he, you know, that was one of the kindest men that I've ever met in my life. Um, and it was a real pleasure to have known him.
Wow. That's an amazing little tidbit there. At least you had that incredible moment where you bonded and you were on the same page and you had such a shared experience. That's beautiful.
It, I think that you know, we had begun to really like each other before Amanda had even passed. But we had we had a lot of laughs, and I didn't know anything about the tobacco industry, for instance. But driving from Southwest Virginia to Durham, North Carolina, you pass through tobacco country.
Mhm.
And you pass a lot of tobacco fields because we always took kind of the back way. And he told me about growing up, and he had family, uncles, um, that were in the tobacco industry, and he walked me through the whole process because he actually picked it and he helped cure it and all these things. And his family was involved in cows and other types of agriculture. And of course, that is also in the area that you drive through. And he walked me through his very early age all the way up until he went to university, working, in agriculture. And the second to last time that I drove him to his infusion, he asked me to take a detour around Smith Mountain Lake in Southwest Virginia, where his father was raised, and he had me take him. And it took a while to find the old home place. And we spent several hours, and we ended up finding one of his uncles
Oh,
who had,
wow.
yeah, who hadn't seen him in a while. And we spent a little bit of time talking to him. And, the whole time he's giving me details, and, he's remembering things that he had kind of forgotten.
Right.
And, that was a real interesting experience, and one that I wouldn't give up for anything.
Wow. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And those are the things, the treasures that you'll keep for your lifetime.
Yeah. Is a lot of information that had anecdote to it. There were valuable lessons in some of the things that he shared with me. And yeah, I think I'm a better person for that experience. The loss is horrible, but the experiences, I think, were very, very valuable.
That's awesome. I mean, because I read a LinkedIn post the other day, and it says, no matter how much money you have in this world or how many worldly possessions you are, we all go out in the same size box. So,
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, that's true. Um,
so
I
that
think
that
I served in the military, and of course I've had family members that have passed, and I I don't I don't think that um I don't think that all death is the same, but I do think that there's no measurement of pain that is universal. And I think that if you are in a position where you've experienced death and loss and pain, I think that you can learn from it. Nobody wants to learn from it, but I think that you can. I think that it's the ultimate kind of opening to empathy. Um, is that pain? Um, and while I truly wish that both Amanda and her father were still here, um, I feel like the loss and the pain has made me a better person, and I think it makes almost everyone a better person. Um,
if you're willing to let it, you know,
yeah, and I don't remember making a decision to let it. I almost feel like pain just beat me down to the point where I was like, all right, I'm gonna embrace even the things that make me feel horrible.
but those are the learning points in our life. I always have told my kids that, your life is a series of, you meet these crossroads, and you have a chance to go left or you have a chance to go right. And a lot of times those are the decisions that determine where you end up in your life. And those are the learning points that you can gather to determine your path through life. So
I agree.
and that, yeah, I mean, I think it's really beautiful that you had that experience with your father-in-law. So that's really wonderful. But let's get back to Amanda. So she's going through surgeries and things like that. Can you talk more about that and more about the experiences that she had?
Sure. So we get back for her first, well, for her port installation and her first chemotherapy infusion. And we would always go down the night before. And we were in a hotel that night, and we had our dog with us, so took him outside behind the hotel so he could do his thing. And I noticed there were a bunch of cars back there with people that were obviously sleeping in them. And at one point, a gentleman walked up and asked, because I smoked at the time, and he asked if he could have a cigarette. I said, of course. And long story short, I learned that each of those vehicles with families in them were there for cancer treatment. And because of the cost of all things associated with cancer, they were saving money for staying in a hotel. And so I went upstairs and I told Amanda about this. She was very upset. She was very saddened. The next morning, port installation, meet the oncology team, go upstairs for infusion, and we overheard a mother telling their children that they couldn't go downstairs to eat at the food court, which is in the basement of the Duke Cancer Center. And the mother said, you're just going to have to eat the snacks here. And Amanda's coming to tears while she's listening to this. And anytime you go for infusion at Duke, a social worker comes to you and just asks you how everything's going. Do you have any issues? And we address the topic of people staying in their vehicles, and she said, look, what you're going to maybe learn more about is financial toxicity in cancer care. And by the way, the term financial toxicity in cancer care came from two Duke researchers over a decade ago. And so we started reading and learning about it, and it was traumatic to feel the pain and then think about other people's pain, right? Possibility of death, and then on top of that, all these financial issues.
So let me pause you right there.
Sure.
You just brought up the topic for our next part of our interview, and I'd like to invite you back to discuss the financial toxicity and more about your foundation. Would you be willing to do that, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
Okay, great. What I want to do is I want to get your final thought to this point that you'd like to relay to our audience about something you've learned, or just the message maybe you want to relay.
I think I guess I would say, and try to keep it to that time frame. Amanda and I grew closer because we really started having more conversations about everything. And Amanda and I were always best friends, literally the best of friends, but we became better friends. And she grew closer to her sister, if that's even possible, because they were best friends also. She became closer to her college roommates, from almost 2 decades before that. Cancer and the realization of the possibility of death can, and I think should, bring people closer. But I think everyone at that point has to maybe force themselves a little bit to become more vulnerable. And I think early on in a cancer diagnosis, you really, really should be open to healing wounds, forgiveness, asking questions you would never ask before, and learning and growing. As sad as it may feel that you're doing it because of the imminent loss of someone, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. because I think it makes everyone better. Yeah, I mean, I think at least that's where my mind was, and it was affirmed later at that point, in Amanda's story.
That is so beautiful. That's an incredibly beautiful message. Thank you for sharing that. And I have one more question for you.
Okay.
How would you make the world a better place?
So, I, I think a lot about that, at least tangentially, right? Um, so what I think I've come to realize in this whole journey is that if you're not willing to listen, and I mean really listen without opinion, listen without judgment, just listen. I think that you have the inherent inability to understand. Once you're able to listen, I think you're able to understand, and not just understand the point of view being expressed to you, but better understand how you feel about the opinion being expressed to you. And I think if you are open and you're honestly receiving that information, you're able to better process it, align it with what your true moral, spiritual, ethical values are, and then make better decisions that I think makes everything better. And I know that sounds simple and maybe a little bit silly, but I find that I've got a lot more empathy today than I ever had before. And I feel like that enables me to communicate better. And hopefully, the person I'm communicating to is hearing something honest, true, ethical, and moral, and then they're able to both listen better and then communicate better. I really do feel that the way we talk to one another, the way we communicate, the way we engage, um, is maybe not quite as good as it could and should be. And I feel like if we all work on communication, not talking at, but talking with, that makes the world a better place. So, with the foundation, instead of just relying on intake forms, I personally call every single patient. I personally speak with their loved ones, their caregivers. I personally speak with the social workers involved. And instead of just saying, okay, give me this information that I require, I just take as long as I need to so that I hear their story, their concerns, what fears are driving their decisions. And I hope that in doing so, we're able to provide a better outcome. And I feel like I learn different ways to listen better every day. And I know it's difficult to measure an outcome based on these incremental ways of learning, better ways to listen. But I think it makes us more effective, and I hope that the patients we serve feel the same way.
That's awesome. That is really, really awesome and so well articulated. In fact, been asking that question for the past year, and I think that's one of the best answers that I've gotten. So yeah, my hat's off to you. It's just so insightful, and it was like usually that question catches people off guard and they have to think a second, but you could tell that you've thought about it before and you have put so many things into place. So that's really, really beautiful. Dan, I really appreciate you spending time with us, and I think everybody will look forward to part 2 of our interview about financial toxicity in the cancer world. So I really, really thank you for your time.
Well,
And absolutely, absolutely. And I thank all of you out there for joining us at To Be Your Own Hero. Please subscribe, like, make a comment in the comment section, ring the notification bell. And I hope you have an absolutely fantastic week. And we will see you next week at To Be Your Own Hero. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.